That night, the countryside felt different, as if it had swallowed all the air and returned only silence. The woman woke up without any apparent reason, feeling her heart pounding heavily against the mattress. The room was immersed in shadows, and there was a metallic scent in the air, far too cold for that season. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to understand what had awakened her. No crickets, no wind, not even the familiar ticking of the clock in the kitchen. The world seemed suspended, as if it were waiting for something to happen. She rose slowly, her bare feet creaking against the old floorboards, and walked down the narrow hallway. When she touched the doorknob, a faint tingling climbed up her arm, as if the door itself were breathing. She opened it cautiously, and the porch revealed itself like the mouth of a tunnel of darkness. The moon cast a pale glow over the cornfields and the pasture, but it offered no comfort. It merely illuminated the absence of life. Then she saw it. On the horizon, a light pulsed slowly, a distant point that seemed to expand and contract like a beating heart. It wasn't headlights, it wasn't a plane, it wasn't anything familiar. It was a light that seemed to stare back at her. The woman gripped the porch railing tightly. She wanted to call out for someone, but she was alone, and even if she weren't, instinctively she knew that shouting would be useless. The light grew stronger, and with it came a low, subterranean hum that made the wood of the house vibrate. The cattle reacted first, short moos, hurried footsteps in the corral, chains clattering against posts. The cows ran frantically, driven by an invisible fear. She stepped down without realizing, drawn to the strange rhythm of that glow. The vibration coursed through her body, entering her bones, running down her spine like an electric current without pain, but with weight. With each step, the air felt denser. She touched the barbed wire fence, realizing that even the metal vibrated. The entire farm was caught in the same rhythm, as if it had been turned into an instrument of invisible strings. She lifted her hand into the air and noticed there was no wind, not a single leaf moved. The night was frozen, like a painting, except for the distant glow that pulsed. And for a moment, she had the impression that the light wasn't moving toward her. Instead, the space between them was collapsing, as if reality itself were bending to bring them together. She tried to retreat. The house groaned. The beams let out a deep creak, as if answering the hum outside. From the cracks in the windows, streaks of light emerged, like a hidden sun forcing its way out. The clock, once silent, began to tick again, but irregularly, in chaotic rhythms. The sense of being watched grew stronger. Not merely seen, but taken, as if her mind had been opened without permission. She felt a soft weight on her shoulders, a force lifting her upward without touch. Her dress swayed gently, as if surrounded by water, and her feet no longer touched the ground. The woman tried to scream, but her voice failed. Her mouth opened, air rushed in, yet no sound came out. The silence was more terrifying than any possible scream. Around her, the animals cried out, the wind was gone, and yet the whole world convulsed. The farm, once a refuge of normalcy, unfolded into the stage of an inevitable nightmare. Every second, the glow intensified, enveloping her, dissolving her edges, turning her body into part of a brightness that didn't belong to this world. For a moment, she had the impression of being suspended in invisible water. Her dress floated around her, her hair drifted as if submerged in a silent river. She raised her hands before her eyes and saw them becoming translucent. For a fraction of a second, she could see the light passing through her skin, outlining bones and veins like a living X-ray. It didn't hurt, but it was invasive. A profound recognition, as though someone were cataloging every part of her, physical and mental, without asking. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. The cows stopped bellowing. The hum vanished. Even her breathing disappeared. It was as if the entire universe had paused to watch her alone, as if she were the only thing left in existence. When she tried to inhale again, no air entered her lungs. And yet she did not die. She was suspended between two worlds, the farm she once knew and a formless darkness that awaited beyond the light. And in that moment, the thought emerged within her mind, without sound, without a voice, but with perfect clarity: you will be taken. The light, which until then had seemed like a distant dot on the horizon, began to expand. It was not a natural expansion, like the growth of a flame in the wind, but something irregular, pulsating, as if it were alive. Each pulse reverberated through the fields, the corral, and the wooden walls of the house, creating invisible waves that penetrated the woman's skin. The deep hum grew more intense, so much so that she believed it no longer came from outside but from within her skull. It was not a sound that could be muffled by covering her ears. It was vibration itself, invading bones and organs. The cattle became a chaotic mass of movement. The cows ran in frantic circles, lowing loudly, slamming against the wooden fence as if trying to break through. Some reared up, others shoved one another against the gate, causing it to rattle violently. The smell of sweat and dust thickened in the air, a suffocating atmosphere of panic. Watching from the porch, the woman had a horrifying realization: the animals weren't running from the light. They were running from her. Something had already seeped into her skin, and the animals, far more sensitive, already knew. The countryside itself was paralyzed. No insects, no wind, no sound besides the humming. Not even the trees in the distance moved. Their crowns stood still, like painted scenery on a backdrop. Only the animals and the woman's racing heart still moved within this frozen theater. The fear she felt was unlike any she had known before, not the fear of storms, nor of thieves on the road. This was deeper, intimate, the certainty of having been noticed by something that did not belong to her world. The light grew stronger. It was no longer just a glow in the distance, but a beam cutting through the dark, painting the landscape in impossible colors. It wasn't white, nor red, nor yellow. It was all of them and none at once, changing constantly, a reflection alive and shifting. The ground beneath her seemed to ripple, as though the earth itself were breathing in rhythm with the light. The wooden porch shuddered, and she had the sickening sensation of standing on the skin of a colossal animal waking from sleep. She wanted to flee back inside, to lock the doors, but her legs didn't obey. Her body was bound by a magnetism that held her in place. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might tear through her chest. One single thought emerged, sharp and clear: there was nowhere to go. The fear that usually pushed survival now crumbled into silent acceptance. Closing the doors, shuttering the windows, none of it would matter. Whatever was coming didn't need openings. It was already inside her. The beam swept slowly across the field, scanning. When it passed over the corral, the animals went wild, slamming into one another, their cries piercing and desperate. The gate shuddered, and the air was filled with their chorus of terror. And then the light fell upon her. It wasn't like a spotlight. It was a tide. It washed over her, encased her. It didn't blind, it sank into her. The light wasn't seen only with the eyes, it was seen with the body. The moment it engulfed her, she felt herself split. Part of her still stood, rigid, on the porch. But another part was somewhere vast and void, where time did not exist. She was being observed from all sides, as if her consciousness had been disassembled and studied. It wasn't pain, but it was unbearable, the sensation of exposure, of being flayed open from within. She was a book with all its pages forced wide. The world around her froze. The cow's cries stopped. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath. And then the phrase arrived, without voice, without sound, carved directly into her thoughts like a verdict: "You have been chosen." The woman tried to run back into the house, but her body refused. Her legs were bound by an invisible grip, leaving her exposed before the open field. The light intensified, no longer a distant presence but pouring into every crack and corner of the farmhouse. The window glass flared with reflections of white and amber. The wooden walls groaned as though they might split apart. The hum, once distant, had become unbearable, a thunder without pause, echoing inside her skull until there was no distinction between her thoughts and the vibration. Inside, objects trembled. Plates rattled against each other inside the cupboards, silverware clinked violently on the table, the wall clock fell to the floor, though she couldn't hear the impact, swallowed by the relentless hum. And then her feet lifted. At first, only slightly, as if unseen hands were gently pulling her upward. Then more firmly, with an intent she could not resist. Her mouth opened, but no scream came out. The air entered her lungs and left again without sound. She was muted, trapped in a silence worse than screaming itself. The cattle still cried, but their voices felt distant, already belonging to another reality. The farm that had once been a refuge was no longer itself. It had shifted into the stage of a nightmare. The glow consumed everything. For an instant, it was as though she were suspended underwater. Her dress floated gently, her hair drifted like weeds in a river. She lifted her trembling hands before her face and saw them half-transparent. The light passed through her flesh, outlining bones and veins like a living radiograph. It was not pain. It was intrusion. A cataloging of her existence. And then, suddenly, silence absolute. The cattle ceased. The hum vanished. Even her breath was stolen. The universe held still, its entire attention fixed upon her. When she tried to inhale again, no air entered. But she did not die. She hovered between two worlds, the farm she knew, and a formless void waiting beyond the light. Then came the phrase, inevitable and absolute. You will be taken. When she opened her eyes, there was no porch, no pasture, no cattle. The ground had vanished, the night air replaced by something sterile, metallic, stripped of life. She lay on a cold surface, hard as polished stone, beneath a blinding white light that had no source. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant rhythm of machines, like an endless mechanical breath. Her first instinct was to move. Her body obeyed, but sluggishly, as though her thoughts lagged behind her muscles. She sat up, her bare feet meeting the icy floor, and looked down a corridor that stretched without end. The walls were smooth, flawless, gray metal that shimmered faintly. There were no seams, no doors, no screws, no shadows. The light came from nowhere and everywhere, flat and merciless. She stood, trembling, and began to walk. Each step echoed, but not in the air. The sound reverberated inside her, as though the place amplified not just her movements, but her very being. The corridor seemed infinite, indifferent to her, waiting as if it had always known she would arrive. And with every step, the pressure in her chest grew heavier. She touched the wall. She expected cold steel, but instead felt something vibrating softly, like a living membrane pulsing beneath the surface. She snatched her hand away, heart racing, but the sensation lingered in her fingertips. The corridor was not just a structure. It was alive. There was no total silence. There was a breathing sound, rising and fading, irregular, almost organic. And with it came pressure in her skull. Images burst into her mind, not her own. Cities she did not recognize. Towers burning. Skies torn open by clouds that moved unnaturally. Colossal shapes striding across ruins. She squeezed her eyes shut, but the visions pressed on, indifferent to her resistance. The corridor seemed to change as she advanced. The walls grew narrower, pressing against her. She was not walking, she was being led. Like a pawn sliding across a board, pushed by unseen fingers. The thought made her dizzy. Then the machine breath stopped. The light grew harsher, stabbing at her eyes until they watered. Even with her eyelids shut, it pierced her. The silence became oppressive, loud in its absence. And then a wordless command entered her thoughts. Continue. Her legs obeyed before she could resist. At the far end of the corridor, shapes began to emerge. The perfect whiteness fractured, revealing shadows that had always been there, waiting for her eyes to adjust. They didn't walk. They slid, like reflections without origin. Tall, taller than any human, yet without clear edges. Their bodies shifted constantly, dissolving and reforming, made of the same light that filled the corridor. She froze. Her body was rigid, trembling, her heart a frantic drum. But there was no sweat, no breathlessness. The fear was deeper, the kind that stripped her from the inside out. They did not speak, but they invaded. Questions rose in her mind that weren't hers. Where have you been? What do you fear? She clenched her fists, squeezed her eyes shut, tried to recall something, anything human. The smell of wet earth. The warmth of firewood. The sunsets over her field. But those memories slipped away, torn from her like pages ripped by impatient hands. They weren't looking at her. They were reading her. Time dissolved. Seconds or hours, she couldn't tell. Her mind was stretched thin, weighed down by their silent scrutiny. And then they shifted. The light around them dimmed slightly, revealing a glimpse beneath the brilliance. She saw the impossible, eyes. Immense, malformed, unblinking eyes, staring at her with infinite fixation. And then, carved into her consciousness with merciless clarity, "We are arriving soon." The voice appeared inside her mind as if it had always been there, waiting for the moment to be revealed. It was neither male nor female, had no timbre, no warmth. It was communication stripped bare, and it hurt. "You are not dreaming. You are here because you must know." The words weren't heard, they were inscribed directly into her memory, as though she had always carried them. She tried to react, tried to scream, to demand answers, but her body betrayed her. Her jaw was locked, her lips immobile, her breath reduced to something automatic, detached from her will. The only part of her that still moved freely were her eyes, wide and frantic, forced to witness what she longed to escape. The figures drew closer. With each movement, her skull throbbed with pressure, as though the space within her head were being stretched and colonized. They did not touch her, but their presence compressed her mind. She wasn't just being looked at, she was being dismantled. Her thoughts were no longer her own. Memories surfaced, not by choice, but because they were dragged out of her like loose threads pulled from fabric. She saw her mother's face, long dead, only for it to dissolve and twist into something inhuman. She saw her farmhouse, but it was burning. She saw her pasture, but it was covered in shifting shadows with no form. Pain erupted when she tried to resist. Not physical, but sharper than any wound, a searing agony slicing across her mind like a blade of light. The more she fought, the deeper the cut went. But some part of her clung to resistance, clutching fragments of herself as if each memory were a branch in a flood. The voice returned, calm, unyielding, filling her skull. "Do not fear. You are already with us." They drew nearer. Each step, if it could even be called a step, thundered directly inside her thoughts, bypassing sound entirely. Their presence was suffocating. Not physical, but psychic, an immense weight pressing her down. Her eyes watered not from light, but from the unbearable pressure of proximity to something incomprehensible. Instinctively, she shrank back, pressing against the cold metallic wall. The chill seeped into her skin like ice, but offered no comfort. It reminded her only that she was trapped. The corridor, infinite before, now felt crushingly narrow, the creature's approach erasing the very sense of space. Then the voice again, louder, sharper, unassailable. "We are arriving soon." The words weren't warning. They were fact, a verdict delivered without appeal. Her breath quickened, her knees trembled, but her body stayed pinned, paralyzed under their hold. Tears rolled down her cheeks slowly, unnaturally, as though even gravity were being controlled. And in that moment she understood, the greatest terror wasn't what they might do to her, but what those words meant for the world she had left behind. Block 8, English translation. She tried to ask a question, anything to anchor herself. But the moment she formed the thought of speaking, the pain returned. A blade of light slicing across her brain, a punishment for even imagining words. Instead, the answers came as visions. They erupted inside her, violent, unstoppable. Cities burning. Skyscrapers collapsing beneath skies split with impossible storms. Rivers drying to cracked bones of earth. Oceans boiling, animals scattering, humans screaming in languages she didn't know. And beneath it all, a suffocating certainty, inevitability. This wasn't a distant threat, nor a warning. It was already written. The future had been carved in stone. These beings weren't messengers of doom. They were its architects. She dropped to her knees, clutching her skull, desperate to block the visions. But the harder she fought, the stronger they grew. The corridor dissolved. The ship dissolved. Reality itself gave way, leaving only the endless cascade of ruined worlds. One after another, all ending the same way. Then, inside the storm of visions, the phrase returned, softer now, almost soothing, yet more terrifying for its tenderness. "We are arriving soon." The visions faded. The corridor reassembled itself around her, metallic walls returning like a prison rebuilt. But she wasn't alone anymore. To her left, separated by a thick glass wall, there was another room. Inside sat people. Dozens of them. Men and women, young and old, all strapped to chairs that seemed fused to the floor. Their faces were frozen in expressions of horror, eyes wide, mouths stretched in silent screams. For a moment she thought they were corpses. Then one man blinked. Another shifted his chest in a shallow breath. They were alive. Alive, but paralyzed, enduring the same nightmare as she was. Their eyes met. The exchange was wordless, but clear, confirmation. A pact of silent witnesses that what was happening was real. Her stomach turned to stone. This wasn't just about her. She wasn't singled out. They were being collected. Not chosen. Taken. Like cattle for slaughter. Like specimens. She stumbled toward the glass, raising her hand to pound against it. But her palm stopped short. The air solidified between her and the barrier, as if reality itself had thickened. She couldn't touch them. She couldn't even reach. The figures behind her watched, still, silent. The humans across the glass sat frozen in their restraints. She was trapped between them, powerless. And then the voices returned. Not one this time, but many, overlapping in dreadful harmony, echoing inside her skull. "Prepare them. We are arriving soon." She didn't remember how she returned. One moment she was at the glass wall, surrounded by prisoners and alien shadows. The next, she was collapsing onto her knees in the dirt outside her farmhouse. The night sky was unchanged. The stars shimmered coldly above. The moon hung where it always had. But she wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. The cattle stood quietly in the field, calm now, as if they had never panicked. The house was still, no lights pouring from its windows, no trembling beams. Everything appeared ordinary. But it was a false ordinary, a staged reality hastily painted over the truth. She pressed her hands to her face and felt the warmth of her tears. Her body shook, not from cold, but from the certainty that she was not alone. Then it came again. Not spoken, not whispered. Etched inside her gut. "Prepare them. We are arriving soon." And she understood. They hadn't spoken only to her. They had spoken through her. Every gust of wind rattling her windows, every shadow crossing the cornfields, they weren't signs of solitude. They were reminders. The message was already spreading. It was only a matter of time before everyone heard the same call.